How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you back to our Season 7, Week 9 Around the NCAA recap show. Your Pitt Panthers coming off a gigantic victory over Coastal Carolina, probably our most complete performance of the season to date. CJ Kirk, 6 total touchdowns. Unbelievable. Adarion Mitchell defensively with a couple of sacks, 9 tackles, one of his best games other than his 3-sack performance in the season opener against West Virginia. And it was one of those games where everything kind of just went right for us. You know, Coastal hung around in the second quarter, gave us a little bit of trouble. They had a 14-10 lead at one point, but then we had 3 touchdowns late at the end of the second quarter, and that really just pushed us ahead for good and gave us, the momentum we needed to really outrun them in the second half. Huge day offensively. Passing the football was fantastic. Running the football was just solid. In the red zone, we did really, really well. 8 trips, 6 touchdowns, which is great for us. 167 rushing, 405 passing, and you can see CJ Kirk 353, 5 touchdowns, and the biggest thing there, no interceptions, which was unbelievable. Austin Penny comes in, throws a touchdown pass to Scott Whaley, of all people, which was fantastic to see. Love getting to see some of those talented players have an opportunity to make an impact. And what was interesting, Kirk led us in rushing, 53 yards. He had a 25-yard long. Reynolds didn't really have a great day, 41 yards total, a 14-yard long. Did get a touchdown run to make him feel good, of course. But we did see some nice players come in. Quincy Veers on a jet sweep. D'Anthony Hamilton getting to show off his speed. Daenerys Carter and so on and so forth. So I love how much we spread the ball around. Take a look at this. 400 yards passing, but we had nobody with more than 5 catches. Ceno Rogers was our only guy with 100 yards. You had KJ Welsh, 4 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. Great to see him getting involved. Onyango had 2 catches for 60 yards, both about 30 yards on both of his grabs. Christian Klump with another nice solid performance, 4 catches for 57 yards. He's become an incredible safety valve for our offense. Nash Jackson with a touchdown. Scott Whaley, like we mentioned, with a touchdown. Quincy Veers getting involved in the offense as our number 6 receiver. Good to see a guy that's stuck with the program for this amount of time really have an impact and get to play, a good chunk of the game later on in the action. So really, really nice. I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 different guys with a catch. Correct me if I was wrong there. It's either 9 or 10. So great game there. And this is where the stats are a little messed up. We had no pancakes. On the 1 touchdown, we clearly saw Davion Reynolds absolutely level somebody right at the goal line. Should have had a pancake himself, didn't get one. That's how the statistics in this, at least for offensive line purposes, on the user side of things, are definitely a little skewed. So when we get to the end of the year, I don't know if we have a pancake statistically all season. We know that that's not true, and so I think we'll have to take that with a grain of salt, but something to keep in mind. Really nice performance defensively. Bordeaux gets a sack, Jalen Hills gets a sack, Adarion Murphy with a couple of sacks, nice deflection from Youngling, and just an overall really, really solid performance. Johnny Midday actually missed a field goal. It was an easy field goal as well. It was a pretty chip shot early on, so tough break for him, but still one of the best kickers in the country, if not the best. I think he may lead the country in field goals made at this juncture. D'Anthony Hamilton showing off why he's so valuable to the team with a really nice kick return as well that had a big chunky yardage. Could have maybe went for a score before he got hauled down. McCall showed why he's so talented. He had a really, really nice touchdown run, 75 yards, but then we decided, we're not going to let him beat us. His rushing numbers are a little bit skewed because of the fact that college quarterbacks lose yards for sacks. He probably would have been over 100 because I think we sacked him 5 times. And he had 80 yards still. So probably would have been over 100 yards actually rushing on the day as opposed to what he ended up with. Passing-wise, they were okay. They never really threatened us passing the football, and I think that's why in the second half we were able to clamp down on their rushing attack, especially because they had a couple of big gainers. Obviously, the McCall touchdown is the biggest one to think of, but otherwise, they didn't really threaten us too much. So big win for the Panthers, 58-17. Some big games around the ACC. Miami with a dominant win, 45-6, but then the big game of the week, Clemson 49-23 over North Carolina, does a huge favor for us, the Panthers, because that gives North Carolina their second ACC loss. Pitt, currently sitting 4-0 in the ACC, means we'd have to lose twice and have North Carolina beat us for them to be able to overtake us in the ACC standings. Syracuse with a big win to get to 5-3, couple of late field goals there to push them past Louisville. Florida State gets back on track after losing to Clemson previously with a 38-17 win over NC State. And again, that helps NC Clemson, because NC State was one of those teams that could potentially have a tiebreaker over Clemson should they win their head-to-head battle. Some big games around the country here. Iowa State with an upset. They were knocked from the ranks of the unbeatens by Baylor last week. They come right back and knock Oklahoma State from the unbeaten group with a couple of late touchdowns. Huge win there, come from behind win for the Cyclones. Clemson, as we already mentioned, and then another big win, Penn State at home beating Ohio State 29-26, 2 fourth quarter touchdowns for the Nittany Lions. Another team down 20-14, they end up pulling off a huge 29-26 victory over the Buckeyes. Gigantic win for the Nittany Lions there. South Carolina goes to 7-1 with a win over Mizzou, 31-24 in overtime. Big win for the Gamecocks to keep their SEC hopes alive. Baylor with a big win over Kansas, high-scoring affair. Washington goes to 8-1 with a win over previously 6-1 Cal, 31-24. Cincinnati just keeps on chugging along, 35-12 over SMU. Texas with a win. Bama, 45-24 over Tennessee. Darion Williams Jr. just continuing to do what he does. Darius Rogers-Cole catching a touchdown pass. But take a look at this. Unbelievable performance from Darion Williams Jr. 206 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. Tyrone Woods, their backup running back, even adding 82 yards and a touchdown on just 5 carries. So that Alabama rushing attack is incredible. But as we go to Week 10, we can see the Panthers, off the strength of that huge victory, Ryan Gilbert decides to commit. He actually wasn't even scheduled for a visit for 2 more weeks. I think he was supposed to come during the North Carolina game, which is 2 games from now, but he decides, you know what, no sense in waiting. I'm checking on the dotted line. Virginia Tech, Penn State all had expressed significant interest in the New Jersey tackle prospect, but we are able to secure his signature. So we'll finally get to scout him because he was a 4-star, and our rule was if they're outside of PA and a 4-star or above, we can't scout them. He does go down a couple of overall, but still, the number 2 tackle in the country. More than happy to get him into this year's recruiting class. Nicholas Moss, a quarterback. We've already got 2 quarterbacks in this class, so we didn't need him. Looks like a decent player, good power, not great throw accuracy, but, okay player. Decides to go to Miami of Ohio. We wish him all the best moving forward in his career. And then, of course, because we haven't completely finished scouting a couple of our other players, we can finish with Jeremy Childress and Victor Scott here. And unfortunately, Childress, I don't know if he's had an injury-riddled senior season, something of that nature, but his speed, which was graded at a C, ends up at a 63, so he does not live up to that grade. Drops to 65 overall. He's a bust, loss of 7 overall from what he was projected at. That is horrible to see. Victor Scott, another bust. So 2 4-star busts for us in this recruiting class. Scott was projected at 69 overall, which is already not great for a 4-star, but he comes out at 64. And really, for him, his athleticism is good. I could see him still playing a role moving forward because of the fact that his skills are not great. That's where his grade really went down, was with his skills. But that's something that with some development can get better. He does still have good speed and good measurables. It's just we're going to need to coach him up a good bit. But you can see the state of our recruiting class as it stands right now. We add another signing, a 4-star, which is great, and one that looks to project a little bit better than a couple of those other 4-stars. Some other great news coming out of that week is C.J. Kirk is named NCAA Offensive Player of the Week. 353 yards passing, 53 rushing, over 400 total yards of offense, 6 touchdowns for our sophomore quarterback is going to garner him NCAA and ACC Offensive Player of the Week honors. Senior defensive end Matt Townsend, really talented player for Clemson, ends up with 2 sacks and a fumble recovery in their victory over UNC to get ACC Defensive Player of the Week. And then we look at the Heisman race. Justin Martin from Ball State, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns for the unbeaten Ball State Cardinals. And so he's well into the Heisman race with the strength of that season. Marquez Gordon of Penn State's there as well. Darion Williams with their huge win over Tennessee. We already talked about his performance. He's up in the race. Calicolio, the quarterback of LSU, big game for them in their victory. They have a huge matchup coming up here in just a couple of weeks with Alabama, so we'll see both of those guys in the Heisman race. Can they have their Heisman moment in that matchup? And Ja'Shawn McNeil drops down a little bit, though we did have 99 yards in their victory over NC State. So can Justin Martin from Little Ball State end up with the Heisman? We'll have to wait and see. But Alabama, LSU, both of them with a light week this week. Alabama taking on an FCS school, while LSU will have the week off before the two of them will face off in a head-to-head matchup, which is going to be unbelievable. Presumably, as long as Bama doesn't lose in a dramatic upset this week, it'll be a number 1 versus number 2 showdown, as Ohio State, previously number 2, dropped down to number 7 this week. Cincinnati up to 3, Penn State up to 4, and your Pitt Panthers jump all the way up to number 10 in the polls, and we even garner a first place vote. How about that? You can see Cincinnati had 3, Pitt had 1, despite the fact coming in at 10th in the coaches poll. We did have 1 first place vote, which is great to see. Clemson is at 5 right now, ACC foe to take note of. Oklahoma, defending national champion, sitting there kind of sneaking through at 9 with their 1 loss. Washington at 11, probably the best chance for the Pac-12 to get into the college football playoff. Oklahoma State with their first loss drops all the way down to number 12, losing to Iowa State, who jumped all the way up to number 8. You can see undefeated Louisiana Lafayette sitting there at number 17, Western Kentucky at number 20. So some unbeatens, but they're coming from mid-majors. It's going to take a lot of convincing for them to have any kind of impact on the national schedule and the national layout. Ball State as well undefeated. You can see they're receiving votes now. North Carolina stays just barely in the polls. And we do get our first BCS rankings of the season. Alabama 1, LSU 2, pretty much the same, very similar to the coaches poll as it stands here. Iowa State's at 6, so a little bit bigger of a jump for them. We are at 9 as it stands. I guess it's not the first one because it does say last week there we were at 14, but the first time we're showing them, to my recollection, in this file. Oklahoma at 10, which is a bit surprising, and this is where you can see some of those mid-majors a little bit lower in the rankings despite their coaches poll rankings. ACC Coastal standings, we still have 4 games left in the season, so all to play for here, but we're 4-0 in conference. Virginia Tech, North Carolina, Miami, Virginia, all with 2 losses. We have wins over Virginia and Virginia Tech already. We do still have to play North Carolina and Miami, but they're going to need to both beat us to have any chance to try and get into the conference championship game, the way things are shaking out right now. And it looks like a collision course with Clemson, more than likely 5-0 in conference. They still have a few non-conference games left to play, but they're looking like a certain lock for the Atlantic Division title. Not a ton of games on the ACC slate this week. Big bye week for whatever reason. We will take on Georgia Tech at home in an ACC matchup. Clemson will face Virginia. Syracuse will host Wake. And then North Carolina with a huge non-conference showdown against Baylor. Crazy to see that late in the season, but Baylor, North Carolina should be a really, really interesting matchup. Cincinnati is going to host Memphis this week in a midweek clash. They're playing on a Wednesday. The Bearcats looking to stay unbeaten. Number 9 offense in terms of yardage, and really where they're so dominant is rushing the football. 250 yards a game. AC Reese, we know he's a mobile quarterback. Cantrell's been unbelievable for them as well. So Cincinnati looking very strong thus far this season. Big matchup here. Iowa State, they got back to winning ways with a huge upset victory over Oklahoma State. Now they're going to have to fend off Kansas State, who's a pretty solid opponent as well. Turnovers may be the real difference there. K-State with a -5 turnover differential so far this season. Another non-conference game here. This is a huge non-conference week for whatever reason. Stanford, Oklahoma, big non-conference game there. But we got a few rivalry matchups. Michigan State taking on Michigan. Northwestern, Nebraska. You can see Nebraska now 7-1. I don't think anybody had them on their radar going into the season, but they've been very, very good. Number 7 scoring offense, number 1 defense in the country. Probably the only thing they could do a little bit better is their turnover differential is not great, but watch out for Nebraska as the season goes along. They could take the Big Ten West title, and if they only have 1 loss and end up somehow winning the Big Ten championship game, who knows what that could mean for the national picture. Georgia, better ranked than Florida by talent, but just always underachieving for whatever reason. It seems like 4-3 thus far this season, 3 SEC losses. They're going to try and upset number 12 Florida. Penn State, after that huge upset win over Ohio State, looking to try and avoid any kind of hangover coming into this week against a decent Illinois squad that's 4-5. Penn State 6-1, relying heavily on star quarterback Marquez Gordon to put up a big performance for them. Coastal, coming off the loss to us, they're going to take on Louisiana Lafayette, who's 6-0, number 17 in the country. We'll see if that Coastal squad can bounce back from a shellacking there at Heinz Field. They go back home. Can they get a big Sun Belt victory? North Carolina, Baylor. Baylor, we know, beat Iowa State earlier in the year. They're 6-1. They're very, very strong. Great offense, but two teams that really have underachieving defenses right now. Baylor, though, 8 better than North Carolina as far as the turnover differential is concerned. That could be, again, a real difference in the game. We always bring it up, but we know just how important it is here. Two teams with really good turnover differential, some of the best in the country. USC, number 15, 6-2, taking on also 6-2 but unranked Oregon State. Cal looking to bounce back with a matchup against Arizona. So there's your top 25 this week, leading into your Pitt Panthers taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Another home game here at Heinz Field. The Panthers, number 4 offense in the country by yardage. Georgia Tech, well at the other end of that spectrum, number 89 offense, -4 turnover differential. The one area where it'll be interesting to see, Pitt had such a great game through the air last week. 173 yards per game is all Georgia Tech gives up through the air. Number 22 pass defense in the country. So we'll see if CJ Kirk can put together another nice back-to-back performance when they take on the Yellow Jackets. Looking at Georgia Tech's results, they had an easy win to start the year, and then it's kind of been all downhill from there, really based on the offensive struggles. They had a shootout versus North Carolina, but otherwise they were shut out by Miami. They just narrowly fell to Virginia Tech, lost to BYU, Florida State, got back on track with a win over BC, but then fell to Virginia in their last matchup. And Scott Brown, their quarterback, really not very good statistics. 6 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 1,300 yards this season. But he's a good rated quarterback, so it's interesting that he seems to underachieve so strongly on this Georgia Tech squad when he has a nice supporting cast around him. Henry, their running back, is really, really talented, and he's a good, solid player, but just really not having a great season this year. Kirk, in contrast, has really turned it on the last couple weeks. 17 touchdowns against 6 interceptions now for our sophomore quarterback. But like we mentioned, Henry's fantastic. 94 overall, really good player. And honestly, Brown's not a bad quarterback at all. 92 overall. He's a pocket passer, but he's got a little bit of mobility. But he just seems to struggle. His completion percentage isn't good. He's got Preston Casillo, the sophomore, behind him. Not great. They have one quarterback with really good speed as well, but doesn't see any significant playing time. Henry is the guy to watch out for. Kyle Wheeler's solid as a guy to spell him as well. But if they feed Henry, it's going to make it an interesting game for us, because when teams have had solid running attacks, we have struggled a bit defensively. Collier, probably the guy to watch from the slot there. Pretty good speed for if the receivers are concerned. Sharp is a decent tight end, but not anybody that really wows you. Washington on the offensive line is solid, but the rest of them are all pretty much high 70s. So I think, Nehemiah Parker at right tackle, he could really be in trouble with Jalen Hills, our leading pass rusher, getting after him. Antonius Williamson, though, 6.5 sacks, 88 overall. He's a really, really talented player. You put him at left end. That's going to make it interesting. We do have a senior right side of our line, so you'd think with their experience, they should be in shape for a pretty good performance. Griffin at defensive tackle is also very, very solid. But, the fact that Luke Davis, our best offensive lineman at center, should hopefully handle him up them. Karan West, solid player for Georgia Tech. And Brent Lawson, really solid corner, 93 speed, 89 overall. He's going to more than likely have the task of having to take on Sino Rogers in this matchup. So Georgia Tech defensively, not bad. They got a lot of juniors as well. You can see Eric Franklin, 89 speed, 84 overall as a junior. I think this could be the team that maybe next year is their big year to really shine. They will lose Henry, of course, a senior, but next year could be the year for Georgia Tech, but we shall wait and see. So as always, guys, let me know in the comments your score predictions for this week moving forward when we take on the Yellow Jackets. Thank you so much for watching. Hail to Pitt. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.